They called me down to Motown, and they said, well, we're going to sign you to a contract, but we're not going to record you. And I said, well, why? And they said, we're going to give you $500 a week. I said, oh, okay. I was a reserve, and I didn't know it. David Ruffin came to my house at midnight before they called me to Motown. They asked me to be in attendance. He says, they're going to ask you to replace me tomorrow. I said, you got to be kidding, man. They want you to be a member of the Temptations. I said, to replace who? They said, David Ruffin. I dropped again. I said, nobody can replace David Ruffin.
I've got sunshine.
Dennis Edwards, who passed away at the age of 74 due to complications from meningitis, holds many secrets in his death. He wasn't an original Temptations member. However, he played a crucial role in the group from 68 to 77, contributing to some of their most memorable hits. Because of his short yet clear role in the band, his death caused shockwaves around the world. His robust and urgent lead vocals provided a stark contrast to his predecessor, David Ruffin's sweeter tones.
Baby, 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 don't worry, don't know.
Edwards' style was particularly well suited for gritty and funky tracks like Cloud 9, the apocalyptic Ball of Confusion, and the 1972 US chart topper Papa Was a Rollin' Stone. Following attempts to launch a solo career, Edwards later reappeared with the Temptations in the 1980s. In the 90s, he went on to establish the Temptations Revue featuring Dennis Edwards, a group with which he continued to perform until 2018.
Mama just hung her head and said, son, Papa was a rolling stone.
Before joining the Temptations, Edwards was a member of the Motown group The Contours. The Contours often served as the opening act for the Temptations. When Eddie Kendricks and Otis Williams became fed up with David Ruffin's erratic timekeeping, cocaine use, and ambitious desires, who also tried the group to be renamed David Ruffin and the Temptations, they turned to Edwards. In 2013, Edwards recalled, quote, I had been hearing rumors about David and drugs and alcohol. One morning at 4 a.m. he knocked on my door. I said, David, it's 4 o'clock. He said, I'm leaving the Temptations, and they're gonna ask you to replace me. With its tense and edgy beat, accompanied by wah-wah guitar, Cloud 9 introduced a new style known as psychedelic soul. The lyrics addressing issues of poverty and street violence signaled the Temptations' shift away from exclusively singing about love and romance, aligning with the turbulent times. This groundbreaking track not only reached number 6 on the US singles chart and 15 in the UK, but also earned the band and Motown their first Grammy Award. In the subsequent year, the Temptations achieved another milestone by topping the US chart with I Can't Get Next to You. The year 1970 saw them back in the top 10 with hits like Psychedelic Shack and the politically charged Ball of Confusion. Edwards continued to make significant contributions, featuring prominently on the 1972 classic Papa Was a Rollin' Stone, which earned the band their second Grammy.
Mama just hung her head and said, son, Papa was a rolling stone.
In 1977, Edwards parted ways with the Temptations after requesting a $1 million contract, a demand that was denied. Reflecting on this decision later, he admitted, quote, I was young and mad. Soon after his departure, the Temptations left Motown to join Atlantic. Dennis Edwards was born in Fairfield, Alabama to Dennis Edwards Sr., a preacher. At the age of 10, the family relocated to Detroit, where Edwards began singing in the father's church choir and eventually became the choir director. As a teenager, he joined the gospel singing group The Mighty Clouds of Joy. At 18, he formed Dennis Edwards and the Fireballs, delving into jazz and soul music. In 1966, after completing his military service, he tried out for Motown Records and secured a spot on retainer. Following this, he joined the Contours temporarily, filling in for the lead singer who had fallen ill. His tenure with the group ended in 1967, leading to him joining the Temptations.
Before you get into the relationship, you I didn't know how it would sound on a record, you always wonder how it would sound if you never made a record. And it came out pretty good.
He rejoined the Temptations in 1980 when they made a return to Motown. In '82, he participated in a reunion tour featuring Ruffin's comeback. The album Reunion reached number 37 in the US, with the single standing on the top part 1, making it to the top 10 of the US R&B chart. Edwards departed from the Temptations again in 1983. The following year, his duet with Sierra Garrett, Don't Look Any Further, reached number 2 on the R&B singles chart. The album of the same name also secured the number 2 spot on the R&B chart. This single was later sampled by various hip-hop artists including Eric B. and Rakim, Tupac, and Junior Mafia. During the late 80s, he embarked on a tribute to the Temptations package tour alongside Ruffin and Kendricks. Subsequently, he formed Dennis Edwards and the Temptations, prompting a legal dispute with the two original Temptations, Williams and Melvin Franklin. A court ruling prevented him from using the Temptations name, leading to the creation of the Temptations Revue featuring Dennis Edwards. Reflecting on the legal battle, Edwards remarked, quote, "Otis must have spent $1 million trying to shut me down, and I spent $800,000 trying to stay working." In 1989, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a part of the Temptations. In 2013, he received a Lifetime Achievement Grammy, again recognized as a member of the Temptations. Edwards had faced health challenges since falling ill after a performance with his group, the Temptations Revue. Taking a hiatus from the group in May 2017 to focus on recovery, unfortunately he was unable to overcome the complications of his illness and succumbed in Chicago. His wife Brenda confirmed that Edwards' death was a result of complications related to his health.
She told me in a phone interview, was prohibited from seeing him since January 3rd.
My husband was a wonderful man.
Tributes for the late singer have poured in, with Otis Williams, the last surviving original member of the Temptations, sharing condolences on Twitter. Quote, "Very sad to learn of the passing of our brother Dennis Edwards. He is now at peace and our love and prayers go out to his family. We acknowledge his extraordinary contribution to the Temptations legacy, which lives on in the music. Temptations forever, Otis Williams." Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown Records, expressed in a statement that Dennis was the perfect artist to join the Temptations at a critical time in the group's rise. He epitomized their style, tall, dark, handsome, and a voice like no other. Nevertheless, recent reports have emerged indicating that Dennis Edwards' wife had a restraining order against her due to allegations of abusing Edwards in his final days. The couple had relocated to Chicago to seek better treatment for Edwards. An investigation is set to take place in light of these allegations. Brenda Edwards, however, released a statement denying the accusations. If these reports hold true, it marks a sorrowful conclusion to the life of one of the greatest vocalists ever to grace the Temptations stage. Dennis Edwards undeniably stood among the titans of soul, wielding a commanding gospel voice that became the envy of singers across genres. Tasked with the daunting challenge of succeeding the iconic David Ruffin in the Temptations, Edwards not only rose to the occasion, but carved out an impressive musical legacy with the group. His ability to establish himself as a distinguished singer in his own right, rather than merely the replacement for Ruffin, is a testament to his immense talent.
I didn't know anything about the business. I don't think I received the dime off the record.
Now, was that Motown or was that before Motown?
No, that was before Motown.
Edwards approached Motown in 1966 and successfully landed an audition. Despite his lack of notable achievements, he left an impression significant enough for Motown to sign him on a retainer, restricting him from recording or performing elsewhere, but ensuring a steady income. Edwards' breakthrough arrived when Billy Gordon, the lead singer of the Contours, fell ill, providing Edwards with an opportunity to step in. In 1968, the Temptations had solidified their status as one of the hottest acts in America. They had transcended musical and racial boundaries through their now classic recordings and dynamic performances, securing a position as the second most prominent group at Motown, trailing only behind Diana Ross and the Supremes. However, amidst this success, tensions within the group were escalating to a breaking point. The lineup at the time comprised Otis Williams, Melvin Franklin, Paul Williams, Eddie Kendricks, and David Ruffin. Weary of letting their star man leave the group, but aware of their pact that no man was above the group, the other members of the group decided to sack Ruffin. It was a brave decision. Without Ruffin, there was no guarantee that anyone would want to see or listen to future Temptations records and performances. Likewise, who was to replace Ruffin in the group? Around 1968, the musical landscape, particularly in soul, underwent a transformation. Funk and psychedelia became prevalent, exemplified by the success of groups like Sly and the Family Stone. Norman Whitfield, who had assumed the primary role in producing the Temptations following his triumph with Ain't Too Proud to Beg, took notice. Alongside collaborator Barrett Strong, known for his work on Money, That's What I Want, Whitfield began charting a new course for the Temptations. By 1972, the Temptations faced the impending departure of Eddie Kendricks and Paul Williams. Encouraged by David Ruffin, Kendricks decided to part ways with the group due to conflicts with Otis Williams and his weariness of Norman Whitfield's experimental soul sounds. Simultaneously, Paul Williams grappled with alcoholism, leading to subpar performances. To address this, the group enlisted Richard Street to perform behind a curtain, singing Williams' parts and essentially being G as his eventual replacement. Kendricks contributed one final hit hit, Just My Imagination Running Away With Me, before departing, followed soon after by Paul Williams. This left Otis Williams and Melvin Franklin as the sole remaining original members. They brought in Richard Street and Damon Harris as replacements. The reconfigured group achieved a modest hit with Superstar, Remember How You Got Where You Are, a subtle message aimed at Ruffin and Kendricks.
David was practicing then how to throw the microphone up in the air, turn around, drop to his knees, and grab it as the microphone would come down. And I would say, oh man, you ain't gonna be able to do that on stage. He said, yes I am, you watch.
During this period, Dennis Edwards embarked on a romantic relationship with the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin. In David Ritt's biography of Franklin, it's mentioned that there was a period when Franklin was quite taken with Edwards. Reports suggest that Franklin even had Edwards in mind when she composed her classic song Daydreaming. Released in 1972, Franklin openly admitted in an interview with Oprah that she had a fondness for Edwards, stating, quote, I liked him a lot, and further revealing, quote, I did write that with him in mind. From 73 to 77, Dennis Edwards continued to be a part of the Temptations. During this period, the group's frustration with Norman Whitfield grew. Whitfield's masterpiece album, for instance, included a 14-minute version of the title song with only 4 minutes featuring the Temptations, and Whitfield's picture on the back of the album sleeve was larger than that of the group. Damon Harris had been dismissed from the group by this time and was replaced by the dynamic tenor singer Glenn Leonard. Seeking a departure from Whitfield's influence, the Temptations explored collaborations with other producers. Jeffrey Bowen, for instance, produced the A Song For You album, which featured writing contributions from a young Lionel Richie and musical backing from the rest of the Commodores. This album marked an artistic triumph for the group, with Edwards delivering an exquisite rendition of Donny Hathaway's A Song For You. However, the collaboration was short-lived. Motown released an album of outtakes by the group, causing frustration for Otis Williams. The follow-up album, Wings of Love, further irked Williams as it featured Edwards on all the leads, diminishing the roles of the other Temptations.
The sun will be shining, everything.
And then by 1977, Edwards had, in a similar manner to that of David Ruffin, developed bad habits, and his relationship with the other members deteriorated to the point that Otis Williams sacked Edwards for his poor behavior. The group replaced him with a young singer, Louis Price, and also left Motown for Atlantic Records. Edwards remained under contract at Motown, but he couldn't crack a solo career. Fortunately for Edwards, the Temptations fared even worse at Atlantic than at Motown. Their take on disco was decidedly unhip, and their new lead singer was struggling to fill Edwards' shoes, despite him being an incredibly talented singer. Edwards, meanwhile, was struggling to get his material released by Motown. The singer claimed that, quote, Motown said that if I came in with a good album, they were going to give me $1 million. They didn't give me the money, so I wouldn't sign the deal. In 1980, the Temptations reunited with Motown, marking Dennis Edwards' return as the lead singer. During this period, the group produced one of their most underrated albums, the delightful Power. The album featured a powerful song addressing political abuses of power, highlighted by an incredible bass vocal performance by Melvin Franklin and a masterful display by Edwards.
I was just singing the hits, whatever the hits were, I sung the hits. Any hit record, I sung records by Junior Walker, I sung the Miracles records.
In 1982, Eddie Kendricks and David Ruffin rejoined the Temptations for a tour and a fittingly titled album reunion. While the prospect of a reunion had been in discussions for some time, the effort seemed somewhat half-hearted despite being an opportunity for the group to reaffirm their position in the music scene. The album commenced on a promising note as Rick James, Motown's then latest star, took on the role of producing the first single, Standing on the Top. James crafted a vibrant, funk-infused gem that showcased the shining talents of Edwards and Ruffin. However, the remainder of the album failed to leave a lasting impression. Ruffin was granted only one lead and Kendricks none, with the majority of the tracks featuring Edwards as the lead vocalist. On stage, Ruffin's absence during the initial performances of the tour proved costly for the group, as their contracts allowed promoters to deduct money from their fees for each missing Temptation. As the tour progressed, it became evident that the pre-reunion tour Temptations lineup would continue without Kendricks and Ruffin. By 1984, Dennis Edwards found himself on the brink of departure once again. Glenn Leonard had left, making way for Ron Tyson in the new lineup. This revised configuration took the stage for the Motown 25 televised special, participating in a Battle of the Bands performance with the Four Tops. The atmosphere was electric, with each group jostling and trading lyrics. Edwards in particular delivered a standout performance, his eyes cold and steely, his vocals gruff and powerful. This moment stood out as one of the high points in his career. But relations within the group went down again. Edwards was fired once again, and this time replaced by Ollie Woodson, a versatile singer who would go on to become a legendary lead singer of The Temptations also. Out of the group, Edwards sought to reignite his solo career. Unlike after his first firing from The Temptations, Edwards was more successful with his second attempt. He hooked up with producer Dennis Lambert, who had produced The Temptations' Surface Thrills album, who told him he had a song for him and that he wanted Chaka Khan to perform a duet with him. Edwards, in an interview with Jim Bagley, recounted that, quote, "I met the producer Dennis Lambert, who said, quote, we have this one track, we want to get Chaka Khan to do it with you, but we can't find her. We have this girl Sieta Garrett who is already on the demo. After I heard it, I said, well, if you can't get Chaka, we can leave this girl on there. She's great. I just added my part and it was an immediate hit." Yet Edwards was still looking for his $1 million deal, and no such deals were forthcoming. By 1987, despite the recording success of Treat Her Like a Lady and smaller hits like Lady Soul and Do You Really Love Your Baby, The Temptations' recording career hit a roadblock. In an attempt to chase hits, the group aimed to modernize their sound, but the endeavor largely backfired. Compounding the challenges, Ollie Woodson was dismissed from the group due to alleged unprofessional behavior. Otis Williams, in his autobiography, claimed that Edwards was actively sought out and pleaded to rejoin the group. This uneasy working relationship eventually reached its inevitable conclusion in '89 when Edwards left the group for the final time. During his third tenure with the group, Edwards did contribute to an album titled Together Again. Despite being in line with much of the group's output from the 70s and 80s, the album was mediocre overall. However, it did feature one exquisite ballad, the fabulous I Wonder Who She's Seeing Now, which even included Stevie Wonder on harmonica. Unfortunately, the song faded away due to a lack of promotion from Motown. Edwards was then once again gone. His relationship with the group was broken, and it would take over a decade before he and Otis Williams would be on friendly terms. In 1989, the Temptations were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Usually the group's original members are inducted. Replacements are typically excluded. Fortunately for Edwards, it was decided that his contribution to the group warranted his induction into the Hall of Fame, alongside the Classic Five era of David, Eddie, Paul, Melvin, and Otis. The ceremony, as Edwards recounted, was tense, especially when Otis and Melvin came along with the current lineup of the Temptations. But the group's brief reunion that night led to a promoter offering Edwards a contract to perform with Eddie Kendricks and David Ruffin. Edwards would claim that, quote, "We were so successful and actually better than Otis Temptations. We were even able to talk David out of doing drugs for a while. On his own, out of the group, he helped develop and persist." Edwards decided to form his own version of the Temptations. However, after being billed as Dennis Edwards and the Temptations overseas, word reached Otis Williams, who by this time was leading the Temptations. Williams and Edwards battled in court, with both sides spending nearly $1 million each on legal fees. Edwards decided to settle and offered Williams an agreement that he would tour as the Temptations Revue featuring Dennis Edwards, and wrote into future contracts with promoters that if they used the Temptations name and branding, they would be liable to Otis Williams. The group consisted of Edwards and longtime members Mike Patillo, Chris Arnold, and David C. Paul Williams Jr., son of original Temptations Paul Williams, would also perform with the group, as would former Temptation Ollie Woodson, meaning for a time Edwards' version of the group would have two Temptation greats in, leaving Otis Williams with younger, newer members of the official Temptations. In an interview in 2000, when Williams was with his younger, albeit Grammy Award-winning lineup, Edwards said about his group that, quote, "Had to wait, but I've got the right voices now and to reproduce the Temptations' magic. I'm not talking about Otis, but I don't think the Temptations have got the voices now." Dennis Edwards leaves an incredible music legacy. He not only overcame the seemingly impossible task of replacing David Ruffin as lead singer of the Temptations, he led the group to even bigger heights with his sound. One of his fans wrote, quote, "Dennis brought them into the psychedelic sound, and a damn fine job he did. Rest in peace. Seemed like a good dude. There's no replacing David, it was just a new chapter. Good stuff." Another one added, quote, "Dennis was not an original, but he was the longest lead singer the Temptations had. He held his own. His 3 tenures with the group were all exciting for fans. His cool, steely-eyed look on stage presented himself as a force to be reckoned with. His solo career, while not as successful as perhaps it should have been, nonetheless produced some great music." His years with the Temptations Revue gave fans an opportunity to really appreciate his legacy and contribution to the Temptations.